The grand jury investigating former President Trump is expected to hear from more witnesses today. They are looking at if then-candidate Trump falsified business records in order to hide a campaign finance violation, if you can follow me. It's tied to hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels by Michael Cohen.
That's right. Well, the grand jury is pushing forward with its investigation despite former President Donald Trump's recent remarks into an effort to discredit the probe. The former president took to his social platform, or Truth Social platform, to say in part, quote, "It is the district attorney of Manhattan who's breaking the law by using the fake and fully discredited testimony of a convicted liar, felon, and jailbird, Michael Cohen, to incredibly persecute, prosecute, and indict a former president and now leading by far presidential candidate for a crime that does not exist."
That's a big full screen. It's a lot.
You can follow it there. Trump posted he will be arrested on Tuesday. However, there's no evidence to support those claims. He's calling on his supporters to protest if that happens. But some of his most loyal supporters are urging restraint.
Let me be very clear. No matter what transpires, and this doesn't mean this is going to happen, but if was this to happen, we want calmness out there. Nobody for violence or harm to anything else. But what we're really saying here in this whole process is we need equal justice in America.
CBS News investigative reporter Graham Kates has been following this story, and also joining us is CBS News political contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. Thank you both for being here. Graham, I want to start with you, and I know you want to talk about this witness that the grand jury may hear from today, but I think we should just clarify for people. We keep saying, and people keep hearing, alleged hush money payments, but that part of the money trail here is not alleged anymore, right? Michael Cohen paid money to Stormy Daniels so she would not share a story that the former president denies. That part happened. At issue here is whether there was a subsequent move on paper that would be a misdemeanor and maybe even a felony for the former president. Do I have some of that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Cohen went to federal prison in part because of this payment, and he's described in interviews and in his own memoir kind of this complicated setup that he had for the payment, where he and an attorney for Stormy Daniels created a couple of LLCs, and then when the exchange went through, there was the signing of a non-disclosure agreement between the two parties, but it wasn't Trump signing and Stormy Daniels signing. They signed using pseudonyms, and so some of that plays into this kind of falsification of business records narrative that we're hearing about right now.
All right. Thank you, Graham. I got it now. I appreciate you clarifying. Now, the grand jury is going to hear from at least one new witness today. What do we know about that testimony?
Right now, this was a witness suggested by Trump's people. His name is Robert Costello. He's a lawyer who is a former legal advisor to Michael Cohen. And now he didn't actually work with Michael Cohen at the time of the hush money transaction. It was a couple of years later. And so the best assumption here is that he's here. He will be here to kind of talk about Michael Cohen's character, because Michael Cohen is the key witness in this grand jury proceeding.
Now, I want to bring in Jessica. Jessica, this is unprecedented. The possible indictment of a former president. Of course, no president, sitting or former, has ever been indicted. How exactly would this work? I mean, there's so many questions around. Would there be, how an arrest would play out? What role does the Secret Service play? I mean, would he be fingerprinted? Where? Does he just turn himself in? Can you just walk us through what your expectation would be were he indicted?
Well, I think you're exactly right to say that there are a lot of legal questions here. And as you just said, really what we're talking about is the falsification of business records, which is typically a misdemeanor, but it's going to be kicked up, we think, to a felony, because the expectation is that that falsification of the records will be linked to another crime, like the federal campaign finance violations, or like a state law violation dealing with the state elections code. So assuming that that indictment does issue, the next thing is that the former president would be, we expect, arrested. He has said that he would turn himself in. So what does that include? It includes him going into the New York jail, fingerprinted, mugshot. We do not expect that he would spend any time in custody. Let's remember that Any way you slice it, this is a non-violent felony that we're talking about. And then typically what would happen is you would be arraigned. Again, we have to be careful whenever I use words like typically, because this is a historic first. So we know that that's the way it would generally happen. You're booked, you're fingerprinted, you take a mugshot, you wait, you're arraigned. There is some discussion that maybe the arraignment could actually be virtual in this case, that there won't be a, quote unquote, perp walk where we see the former president handcuffed and walking into the courtroom. I wish I had definitive answers for you. But as your question lays out, we have no playbook for this. We have no precedent for this. A lot of it will be what the New York District Attorney is willing to agree to with the former president's lawyers.
And one thing, Jessica, I just want to take you back to, because you kind of mentioned this, but I think it is important, is how it would be kicked up to a felony. That is also pretty nuanced and unusual. Can you just walk us through what it is that would have to be proven to make this a felony, and perhaps if there is any possible defense for the former president?
Absolutely. So the basis, as you were talking about before, the basis of these charges, I think, is the falsification of the business records. The idea that the former president reimbursed Michael Cohen for those hush money payments. As Tony said, they're not alleged payments, they're payments, but he listed them as legal expenses, and they weren't, in fact, illegal expenses. He also said that there was a retainer agreement, and apparently there was no such agreement. So that's how we get the falsification of the business records. How do we get this up to a felony? Well, you have to show that there was an intent to commit or conceal another crime. What's that other crime? At that point, we have a fork in the road. Could it be a state violation? So maybe the New York Elections Code, there's a section there that talks about entering into a conspiracy to basically try and get somebody unlawfully either elected or defeated. And then maybe the cleaner route is to try and hook that falsification of business records to a federal crime, because of course the president was a federal candidate. So what are we looking at in that case? Potentially the federal campaign finance violations. We could also be looking at issues like wire fraud.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jessica Levinson and Graham Kates. Appreciate it.